I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
A Friday edition of Flagrant Howls here, and we have some major ownership-related news to dive into off yesterday's headlines. The sports dad, Judd Zulgad. I am Phil Mackey. This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast. Flagrant Howls, presented in part by our friends at EcoFun. Before we start the show, EcoFun Motorsports is your summertime fun headquarters. They carry a full line of scooters, motorcycles, ATVs, even golf carts you see on the YouTube channel here, electric bikes, side-by-sides, premier brands like Yamaha, Kawasaki, Vespa, Bentelli. On the water side, which you can find all sorts of watercraft at the Forest Lake location, EcoFun. They have a fully stocked line of 2024 Kawasaki and Yamaha watercraft. Two locations, Forest Lake, where you also can get the watercraft, Burnsville, EcoFunMotorsports.com. Tell them Flagrant Howls or Score North sent you in, EcoFunMotorsports.com. So, Judd, this is from The Athletic yesterday. Billionaire businessman and former three-term New York City mayor Michael Bloomberg has reached an agreement to join the prospective Minnesota Timberwolves ownership group of Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez, league sources tell The Athletic. Bloomberg is ranked as the 12th richest person in the world with a net worth over $100 billion, and he brings a major investor to the Lore ARod group, which currently owns nearly 40% of the Timberwolves and Lynx and is in a battle with Glenn Taylor for the majority control of the franchises. Adding Bloomberg to the group would allow the Wolves' new ownership group, if they win this legal proceeding, to go forward immediately with the final $300+ million investment to buy out Glenn Taylor rather than waiting until the end of next season, league sources said. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm glad now that the idea has come up that if this does work for Mark and Alex, that there is not going to be a continuation of like a plan where, well, eventually we'll write this check. I think it's a very good idea now that things have fallen apart completely, that if they get the team, they are just going to buy out Glenn, because that clearly would have helped in 2021.
Yeah.
I think this only strengthens their case. And now we still don't know exactly what in the arbitration case Glenn and his lawyers are going to use as like Lore and ARod missed deadlines. Like, we still don't know. It's not been documented. We don't know exactly what they missed. But if they do win the case, or at least when they go to the arbitration, which I believe is a three-person arbitration board, they've got a pretty strong case now of having enough capital. They have enough to basically say, okay, we've just involved the 12th richest man in the world. So I think it's a good idea. I would love to know, though, like what did they supposedly miss? And is that going to be used against them, where the Taylor camp is going to say, well, yeah, too late now. But I think the most interesting takeaway I have is this. And we talked about this during the finals as well, Phil, or during the Western Conference finals as well. There has been nothing in this entire thing since it supposedly fell apart in late March that lead you to believe that in any way, shape, or form, Alex and Mark are backing off.
No, nothing. In fact, they've if anything, they've been more frontal. We documented this throughout the playoffs. I was basically hanging out courtside. You were at the games 2.5 hours beforehand too. I'm like, before the games, before fans come in, ARod and or Lore are holding courtside or in the back in that sort of revamped the old media room that's now an ownership room. I mean,
it's a club now, man. It's hopping. It's
Club
hopping.
ARod. I mean, they are everywhere in and around the bowels of Target Center during this playoff run, and they're encouraging Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. They are there, and it doesn't feel like a put on to me. I mean, it feels like they are here. This is our team. It felt like it was their team throughout the entire playoff run to me.
Agreed.
Now, obviously, the courts will decide if it actually does become their team. And that's where this Bloomberg thing is interesting. I don't think this announcement has any impact on what's going to happen in arbitration, because what's going to happen in arbitration is about past deadlines that Glenn Taylor is accusing ARod and Lore of not hitting or not hitting with enough money, whatever the specifics are.
Right.
And the Bloomberg edition, as a minority owner, by the way, just to be clear, Bloomberg is the richest of all of these people by far, but Bloomberg is coming in as a minority owner as part of the ARod Lore group. And I think it adds some credibility financially because, hey, here's a guy, if we are ever a little short on funds, or if there's ever any question about whether we have enough liquid or capital, I mean, we've got Michael Bloomberg in the mix here. So I think it provides some peace of mind for the NBA board of directors, and it also provides another big chunk of money to get Glenn Taylor out as soon as possible. But none of that matters. None of this, unless I'm wrong, like none of this Bloomberg stuff matters if arbitration goes Glenn's way, because
Correct.
then Glenn would still be the majority owner of the team, right?
Correct. Well, if we knew what was supposedly missed, like that's my question. And that does not involve Bloomberg at all. But what were these deadlines? Like, were they missed? Is somebody reading the contract incorrectly? So like, there's a lot here. There's a lot here we don't know. And in Bloomberg's case too, keep in mind, if these guys are coming in to, yes, own a basketball team, but let's say they're going to buy land, like let's say that they're going to build, let's say, and we'll get to this, that they're going to launch an RSN. Bloomberg being on the ground floor of that could help fund those things.
Yep.
Like huge.
Yep.
Like, so like there is, in stories like this, there's always a ton of stuff you don't know. And owning a sports franchise in 2024 is not just owning a team. It's potentially building a building. It's potentially building a television network. It's potentially a ton of things. Like if you build out in, the suburbs, you can build a Timberwolves village now. Like look at the Vikings. TCO, yes, it's a huge campus that the Vikings use, but they have built hotels. Yeah. They have built apartments. Like it is a full business operation that goes far beyond the sports team. So like Bloomberg could be an investor in the basketball team, but he could also be, the plan could be that he's going to be a major investor in other business endeavors, which are going to be focused around things again, like television, like arenas, who knows, man, like apartments, know?
Yeah, I mean, and let's get to that part of it. Let's get to the arena part of it, because I've heard some buzz going back to late last summer, and we've reported this on Flagrant House, that ARod and Lore understand the uphill climb that it would be in this market for the public to pay another huge chunk for another stadium or arena. At the time US Bank Stadium was funded, the public paid $500 million in taxpayer money to get that stadium up and built. And that was the biggest chunk at the time that the public had ever paid for any stadium in the history of the United States. And I think there's been that was like 10 years ago now. So I think there's been some bigger chunks. But, the Gopher football stadium, the Target Field had to involve a lot of publicly financed money, part of the Target Center renovation. So
the Saints,
St. Paul Saints, like we've paid for a lot of stadiums around here. Now, if it's me and you, yeah, take some more of my tax money. This is part of our lives and whatever. But
right.
I think if you can avoid that mess and how many years it would take working with local lawmakers and just the mudslinging that would have to happen, the threat of maybe moving the team, which is that started to percolate with the Vikings, that, hey, Los Angeles is sitting over there.
Yep.
So I have heard going back almost a year that ARod and Lore understand that uphill climb. They would ideally like to privately finance a new arena somehow, even if it's a different group than the group that they put together to buy majority ownership. So Nick Halter from Axios came out on Twitter yesterday, and he took a screenshot. Here's the tweet. Here's a map of the area where ARod has told people he's putting together a deal for a new Timberwolves arena. It's the farmers market area. The green area that he draws up is the broader site. The problem is the family that owns the buildings in the red area, he's like circling a couple buildings that you have to have those buildings in that area of that footprint to build an arena. He said the problem is that the family that owns this section of the land told me yesterday, we haven't heard anything from anybody. Well, that's not, I mean, this feels like kind of a gotcha tweet. Well, maybe Alex and Mark and some people are like putting together ideas for where the footprint could be. Maybe they haven't gotten to the step of actually like entering a discussion about purchasing. So it might just still be early in the process. But what's interesting is Target Center right now is almost certainly too small of a footprint to just build a new state-of-the-art arena. It's just crammed between First Avenue and Target Field. There's Kieran's and all those restaurants, the hotel. You can't really create a broader footprint there. You'd have to go somewhere else if you want a modern state-of-the-art arena with restaurants and bars and stuff,
Right.
luxury seating.
Exactly.
So that's going to be interesting. But one thing I had heard, and I feel like Johnny put part of this in his Athletic article, but that Alex and Mark would essentially partner with Live Nation to fill 75, 80, 100 dates a year with concerts and events to help generate more revenue.
Yeah.
So this is a discussion taking place behind the scenes that they would put together a group to privately finance a Wolves Village or a new arena or whatever it may be, and they are looking at that farmers market site.
Yeah, and they might actually be talking about that before they make contact, because that's where the United Soccer team was actually going to play. The original goal was, I believe, that McGuire was going to fund the stadium there, build it privately, but all they asked for was some land help.
Yeah.
And the city's like, no, we can't.
They
Which
wanted a tax break on the,
Exactly.
They wanted no
Which-
property taxes.
And this
right?
is, so Phil, this is where it gets intriguing, because, and I know, despite the fact that we've built all of these stadiums and arenas now, that there's going to be a faction of people who say, screw these guys, they're rich, blah, blah, blah. But those tax breaks, I think, are going to come into play here. Like, I'm not saying that they might not build the entire building. And in fact, if you go back, Marvin Harv built Target Center back in the day, and it's what dragged them down. Like, they damn near sold the team to the boxing promoter Bob Arum, who was going to move the team to New Orleans, not because the team drained him, but because the building did. But there's no question in my mind that wherever the Wolves arena goes, they're going to need tax help, tax breaks. And those are they might seem like small questions, but they're big. But I could very well see that Alex and Mark are sniffing around a site that has been talked about before without yet having made calls, because they know it was at least previously available. I just think we need to be prepared for this to possibly take some turns. And I know Minneapolis is ideal. It's close to, the arena's close to me. It's close to you. It's fantastic. But the most important thing here is that the Wolves don't move. And so wherever they have to play in this town, if they can play downtown, awesome. That's ideal. If they move out to the burbs, that might not be ideal, but it sure beats being in Seattle.
Which burb do you think? I mean, the Wilfs chose Egan for.
Well, here's
the difference between the Vikings is like, because the NFL is a once a week game day ritual, so you can have your stadium downtown,
yes,
once a week for 8 to 10 dates a year,
yes,
and then you can have your practice facility somewhere else where all of your staff is, that's where all their offices are. Yeah,
that's your headquarters.
For a basketball team, it all probably needs to be in the same area. Like your arena would have practice courts and stuff attached, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's my recklessly speculated question.
I'll give you some safe cover.
I'm waiting for it. Thank you.
Reckless speculation.
What is the potential tie-in between the Wilfs and Michael Bloomberg? Because they're both New York, Jersey, East Coast guys. They're both billionaires. There's no question, and it might be good, it might be bad, I don't know. But there's no question that there is a familiarity there, and I just think it's very interesting every time. And I am not for having to drive to Egan for basketball games. Okay,
as a West Metro guy,
I'm a West Metro guy, and it takes me 35 minutes on a good day to get to TCO. So I am not pushing for this, but all I know is when I go out there is a ton of land. Yeah. And I wonder if Bloomberg is involved. I mean, I think it'd be silly to think that Alex and Mark have not talked to the Wilfs, and the Wilfs own a ton of land there. And Egan, as far as a potential venue site, is really convenient. It's right by the airport, which opposing teams absolutely love. But I mean, I was out there at the practice for the Vikings on the last 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Phil. And I mean, I was looking around, and the amount of just land out there is incredible. So I do think I think a potential Bloomberg Wilf tie-in on real estate would be really interesting to find out.
Yeah, no, I mean, option A, I mean, selfishly for me too,
I'm
like,
with
it's
you on
so
this,
convenient, but putting
100%.
us aside, I think it would be a really, really interesting discussion about, I mean, there's certain people that think Minneapolis is already dead and burning, and I can tell you it's not. It is. Minneapolis is it's not what it was 2020 when, everybody was home and there was unrest.
Right.
Maybe it's not thriving like it was 20 years ago, but if you took the Timberwolves, especially a thriving Timberwolves team now the last few years, out of downtown Minneapolis, you'd still have your Vikings game days, and you'd still have concerts and stuff once in a while. But you'd have Target Field. There's just something, too, about Target Center has events. And if you built a bigger and better arena and there was more events happening 50, 70, 100 times a year.
Yep.
There's just something about the heart of the city in that way. But from a financial standpoint, especially like if the farmers market footprint was just not for sale in the way that you hoped, where else would you look? Because I don't think they're going to build another arena on top of Target Center. I don't think the footprint's big enough.
I think you're right.
So if they can't get the farmers market location, they probably would have to look toward the burbs somewhere.
Yep.
Which opens up a whole interesting discussion. Which,
and,
but if that keeps them in Minnesota, okay, like I think all of us would, even if some of us would love for everything to be kind of downtown and Target Field, Target Center, but
Well, and if you go to the burbs as well, I mean, if you built an arena in Egan, you could, if you own the team, keep all the parking. So like every car that parks, you get that. Right now, like the Twins get nothing. The Wolves, as far as I know, get nothing from parking. And parking's a big, big potential revenue source. You also could build, again, a village of shops, of restaurants. So like there's just it's
Rudy Gobert's French cuisine experience.
It's so different now, man, because it used to be, hey, you own a sports team, that's great.
Ricky
now
Rubio's
exactly. Cats meow. Ants, burger joint. Yeah, so like
Spreewell's I got kids to feed.
Yeah, you got so many opportunities there. So that's why I wouldn't dismiss it, but I do think that the introduction of Bloomberg to the group is really, really interesting because I'm not convinced that's just about the basketball team.
No. So, yeah, I mean, Michael Bloomberg, he was on the Forbes last list. He was the 12th richest person in the entire world with a net worth of over $100 billion. So I'd have to go take a look at, I'm assuming he has a vast real estate portfolio as well.
I'm going to look there too, because here's my question. Bloomberg and the Wilfs, who both are, because I mean the Wilfs, their dad made his bones actually in the real estate market.
Mm-hmm.
Do they get along? Like, is there a good relationship there or an adversarial one there? That I do not know.
Yeah. Okay, there's another tentacle to all of this here that is the TV network thing that we're going to get to in a second. But a quick reminder that over at scorenorth.com/shop, we have clearance pricing on all of your Flagrant Howls merchandise. That's right. All of your bring ya ass, all of your pretty much anything Flagrant Howls related. Scorenorth.com/shop is end of the season, lower prices, break every record that's a tie-in to KG's tweet from a couple months ago, and Wolves culture as well. So you can either scan the QR code on the YouTube channel, or there's 48 minutes of Howl as well, t-shirts and hoodies.
Everything must go.
Everything must go.
Everything must go.
Except for Anthony Edwards.
Yep.
Scorenorth.com/shop. Scorenorth.com/shop. So let's get to the TV network part of the news from yesterday. Reading from The Athletic, Lore and Rodriguez have also had conversations with Redbird Capital founder, is it Jerry Cardinal, about collaborating on a new regional sports station to carry Timberwolves and Lynx games in addition to other teams in the area, league sources said. Cardinal has deep connections to the New York Yankees and played a leading role in the formation of the Yes Network in New York, which would serve as a model for a potential new venture in the Twin Cities area. So the Yes Network is wildly successful. I think it's financially successful. I mean, the Yankees certainly have a huge payroll off the back of the Yes Network.
And I think the Yankees have actually sold a bunch of it. I want to say Fox is involved now. But yeah, they definitely launched it. It started with their backing.
So, and it's funny, the Twins tried this with Victory Sports 20 years ago, and it was a little early. They didn't have a deal with Comcast.
They didn't have a stadium, and they didn't have a stadium yet.
Yeah.
And so basically all the politicians said, we're not going to support your ass for a stadium until your games are back on TV. It was Pollad timing, man. Awful.
It was a mess. But we're now at a point where, man, like it's such a wild, wild west with local TV sports rights that if somebody can come in and organize a platform and a brand that has Timberwolves and Lynx games, and oh, by the way, we're looking to fill out a ton of programming here, so we could easily put Twins games, maybe Wild games, maybe have like secondary alternate channels like you have with Ballys Sports Plus. And I was just kind of curious, and you'd probably have that brand create digital content for podcast and YouTube.
And streaming then.
Direct to consumer streaming.
Direct to consumer. So it wouldn't be this pain in the ass that we're currently involved in.
Yep. So it was funny. I was looking at the Yes Network, like how do they fill a 24-hour linear streaming and cable channel?
Yankeeography.
Dude, it is.
Yankeeographies are great with Michael K.
So here's what they have like starting early this morning. We're recording this on a Friday morning. They've got the Yankees Twins rerun from 3 to 6 a.m., Yankees Twins rerun from 6 to 9, and then run it back. So it's basically the Yankees Twins rerun all the way from 3 a.m. until noon. And then they have a show called Live on the Line from noon to 1. Homegrown Path to the Pinstripes from 1 to 1:30. Yankee Magazine, Yankeeography. So they have like prepackaged programming, which Bally's has put together. In the past two. But then you have the Michael K Show, which is an ESPN New York radio show.
Correct.
That they also simulcast on the Yes Network from 3 to 6. You could have Flagrant Howls streaming live on, what would this network be called? Just ARod? We would just call it ARod probably. Phil and Judd and Kyle, Jim P. Grady. From 3 to 6, and then Yankees pregame from 6 to 7. So it's just like a lot of Yankee stuff. But yeah, like if there was a Minneapolis-based, I think it'd be a brand that probably transcends Timberwolves, and it would be linear, available on cable, but also streaming, and probably some digital branches on YouTube and podcast. Interesting. Interesting.
I went through and found some of the new ideas here, okay? Because like the old idea is we got to be on cable and satellite, and once we are, we're covered. And, we're going to charge a lot for our network. In fact, one reason why Victory failed was because the Timberwolves tried to get involved, and the Twins, according to my sources at the time, didn't want to give the Wolves enough, because if they had gotten the Wolves, they probably forced their way at the time onto cable, because then they've got winter programming and summer programming. And this market is not big enough to really substantiate like its own like Twins channel. Anyway, so I found this though. The Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns, and the Vegas Golden Knights all have now direct-to-consumer subscription streaming services, and they are making their games available as well. And this is the important thing, over the air, which means free as well. So take your pick of channels, channel 45, something like that. You cut a deal. But what you're doing is you are allowing consumers who don't have cable or satellite to watch your team. And the realization is this: it's more important in 2024 that we have eyeballs watching us than we're milking the last dollar out of every person that we can. The interesting one, and this is the one that I think they would duplicate if they could. In Chicago, this was announced, I think, this week, set to debut in October, is a new network called Chicago Sports Network. It will carry the Blackhawks and Bulls this fall and winter, and the White Sox starting next spring. 24/7 multi-sport programming network available on cable, streaming, again, incredibly important, and also they're going to find a free outlet to show the games on. So
Interesting. You know what the cost is? The DTC, direct to consumer.
They don't have a cost yet. They don't have a cost yet. But you know what? There's enough young sports fans now, I think, that would gladly pay that price so that they can watch games consistently on their phones, on their iPads without blackout restrictions. So this to me is the direction. So it's not just this, like when Yes launched, it took them a while to get carriage because, again, you're fighting with cable operators and satellite providers. The goal, I think, is to take the fight away and just to make sure everyone can see your damn games, which is the Twins' problem right now. And the Wolves and Wild, I guarantee you, are very, very afraid because if you start the season now, they're not on Comcast, and that means they're absolutely getting skunked.
Yeah. So just to sum all this up from my perspective here, I know that there's still plenty of people, Wolves fans, that are skeptical. Maybe you don't love Glenn Taylor, but you're skeptical about these guys coming in. What's really behind door number 2? And I get that skepticism. But we're talking about between Lore, ARod, and Bloomberg, we're talking about some wildly successful business people here, especially with Bloomberg and Lore and just what they've built from a business perspective. ARod brings a ton of sports acumen and connections, and to his credit, that dude has been courtside at every freaking game. He's got a house out in the western suburbs. I mean, if you're wondering if ARod was going to just like be in New York and drop in once in a while,
he's right by me.
Him and Judd are in the
across the street, but I don't
western burbs.
Don't even know his name.
Both of them have a Timberwolves custom half court in their backyard where they get up their shots. So you've got these 3 guys that are coming in, and they're big thinkers. They're aggressive. They go hunting for guys like Tim Connolly. They're thinking about an arena solution. They're thinking about a TV network solution. Guess who isn't doing barely any of these things? Glenn Taylor. I think Glenn Taylor is sitting there thinking about, how can I innovatively launch a new Yes network and put together the next big thing in local sports media, right? Do you think he's not talking about a new arena? And it's not like, Bloomberg's 80. Dude, Bloomberg's in his 80s.
But he's just in the group.
Right. He's just going to be,
he's not the face of the group.
Send me a Wolves t-shirt and I'll write you some checks.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like, obviously the unknown is what it is, but I'm willing to, whatever the risk is here as a fan, as a podcaster, like, which isn't much, I'm ready for door number 2.
Well, I agree with you. And like we discussed on the last flagrant that I appeared on, this also comes down to this. If we're going to say no, like if as a state, right, or as a metropolitan area, these guys are going to ask for things and everything, we're going to be like, no, then we're probably going to lose the team. But you have to be prepared to play ball. And I do feel like, at least in the past 20 years, we started to play ball more. Mm-hmm. Like Norm Green doesn't leave if Norm Green finds a solution here. He left because he didn't find a solution. Yeah. So like if we're going to say you're staying in Target Center, if we're going to say no tax breaks, the farmers market site, you got to do everything. It's probably not going to end well. And I don't care who we're talking. We could be talking about Mark and Alex. We could be talking about the next billionaire to come down the pike. So, part of this is, I think the question is this: do we want the Wolves to be owned by a current modern conglomerate that's going to run them as such, or do we want the ma and pa, which, by the way, is probably going to drag him back down because Tim Connolly ain't going to stay around for that.
It would be a disaster if Glenn Taylor won this arbitration hearing and maintained. Now, if you want to say he's going to win it and then turn around and sell it to a different group that's similarly big thinking,
and we can talk about that. That's a good show, actually.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you about that.
But we don't know who that is or what. Like, he's not even. For all we know, he wins the arbitration hearing and then he just sits on the team for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
If he wins the arbitration hearing,
Yeah.
and doesn't open the team back up for sale, this thing will absolutely erode back the other way. You're going to have Tim Connolly's going to leave in a year from now.
Yeah.
I could see like other things deteriorating behind the scenes. And what does that lead to? Anthony Edwards doesn't want to play here anymore. Like I could see that happening if Glenn Taylor doesn't step out of the way at some point here in the next 6 months. So,
Yep.
all right. I know you got to get to some other podcast recordings here. A little Judd's hockey show.
Oh, yeah.
Dropping on a Friday.
Yeah, some drama in the for the champion PWHL team.
We're already breaking up the organization.
Jesse Pierce is going to update us because, only in this state could you win a championship and sack the GM less than 2 weeks later.
How about that? So thank you guys for hanging out with us here. The off-season episodes of Flagrant Howls are going to be spicy, both with the ownership stuff, Anthony Edwards in the Olympics later on. We've got free agency and player movement coming up in a month. Plus the Wolves have a couple draft picks. So Flagrant Howls.
Start the network, guys. Let's get that network going. I love this idea.
Put us on, guys. He's the sports dad, Judd Zulgad. I'm Phil Mackey. This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.